Hello and welcome. Here's Brian Kim.
Yep, this is ZeroCardinality. I am here with Sotere once again, and we are actually together in the same physical location right now. So, so here is an episode of Meta Musings, and as always, we have our support champion between us that we're going to talk about, the unconventional support. Can't you see it? It's actually, we're going to talk about support Evelyn, and Evelyn is stealth right now, which is why you can't see support Evelyn. So, what can you tell us about support Evelyn?
I can tell you we may be picking her because we don't have a picture of a different support, but she does have advantages. We have seen a little bit of a pickup in roaming here in Los Angeles for these Season 2 World Championships, and she is a great champion to fill that role because she can get around the map very fast. She has presence when she shows up in lanes. As far as her immediate lane presence, it's not incredibly good, but we have seen people playing her AP. She has good amounts of burst at level 6, and she is a force to be reckoned with. What more do you have?
Yeah, well, I mean, people before the Evelyn remake have called her the moving ward, and she can kind of also fill that same role again this time. I mean, she's stronger now, but yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of roaming. There's been a lot of level 1 fights so far in this World Championships. So I mean, I think we're seeing a lot more of unconventional play, and really Evelyn can fit in with that really well because I mean, I think we talked about LeBlanc's support before and how she was really safe when she was clearing wards, and something kind of similar applies with Evelyn. So I mean, she's really good at that. But going back to our other topic that we're going to talk about, which is the Season 2 World Championships, which is happening right now. Actually, we are at the LA Live Center, and we are actually waiting for the final game of World Elite versus CLG EU to happen, and there have been a lot of delays. I'm sure a lot of our viewers have heard about it, but we're just taking this time to actually get this show to you guys because there have been so many delays. But going back, we are going to talk about a lot of the unconventional plays that have happened during the Season 2 World Championship so far, in the group stages and in the quarterfinals. So do you have anything you want to start out with first?
I will definitely kick it off. First of all, we have to say the most unconventional support we've seen so far has to be ggChPepper Zyra, and of course that was the support of choice for us last week, and we might get that video up on YouTube sometime soon and on ggChronicle. But of course we pointed out her abilities in the sense that Grasping Thorns gave good CC. She could use her ultimate, knock everyone up, and ggChPepper did a fabulous job time and time again of doing that. And I kept on watching the games. I was like, oh, he's playing an excellent support Zyra. The only thing he's doing wrong is he's not dying early enough to get off his passive, that Rise of Thorns, I believe, for that extra true damage. But beyond that, it worked out pretty darn well for Moscow 5. So hopefully we'll see some more unusual things. We have seen some unusual things today and throughout the weekend. I'm going to bring up my favorite item, Aegis of the Legion. We've seen triple Aegis of the Legion. I forget which team was on. Do you recall?
I do not recall, but yeah, we have seen a lot of Aegis of the Legions, and especially right now, like we recently saw World Elite run Aegis of the Legion on Ezreal, and that is a very unconventional pick because people usually like going with all offensive, maybe like a Guardian Angel or a Quicksilver Sash on their AD carries, and Aegis of the Legion is really not something people have run on AD carries. So I mean, they had multiple Aegis of the Legions on their team as well, so I think what they were really trying to go for is that mid-game power because Aegis of the Legion is so cost-effective. They were trying to exploit that cost-effectiveness and try to get all of those stats. Now later on in that game, because the game went so long, World Elite sold those Aegis of the Legions on that Ezreal, and they bought the standard AD carry build, bought the Bloodthirster, bought the Infinity Edge. So they used that Aegis of the Legion in the mid-game, didn't need to have it in the late game, so they sold it, but it's a great item, it's very cost effective, and it's great for the team and great for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's certainly one of the items, and I'm going to hog all the topics here. And I'm going to stick with M5 because they've also run unconventional picks outside of their support role. Alexich ran AP Eve and did really well with that, and AP Zillion. And of course, AP Zillion is something that used to be popular back in the Season 1 World Championships for the North American teams. Never really was popularized over on the European side, but we do see him using it, and using it to great effect. Absolutely stomped those games, and I believe in his interviews afterwards he said, we're just using broken champions, and indeed they are. Morello also tweeted, there's something very interesting about Zillion right now, so we might be seeing a little bit of attention from the balancing team at Riot. That is not necessarily all that M5 brought to the table. They also had Xin Zhao top and have just been doing a lot of things that are incredibly interesting. But that's a little bit of a wrap-up of what they have done that's unconventional.
Yep, and one other thing that I want to talk about is the pick of support champions. So what we've seen mostly is a lot of Sona has been picked, and we've seen some Blitzcrank picks, although not as much as you might expect. We've seen some Taric, but one champion that we really haven't seen much for support is Janna. Janna was only picked, I believe, once. It was in 2 games, but that game was just a remake of the game before. So Janna really hasn't been used much, and we've speculated actually, Sotere and I, about why that was the case, and we think that it's because the big 3 AD carries right now, Ezreal, Graves, Corki, don't synergize with Janna well. Janna does not do very well in lane. She's great in team fights, but she is not as good in lane, and what Graves, Ezreal, and Corki have is that big burst, and you really want a support champion that can support that big burst to help, get kills in lane, and Janna really can't help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. She doesn't have the extra damage that Taric does with Radiance, and she doesn't really protect well against the big burst. Yes, she's good at kiting, she has the shield, she has the knock-up, she has Monsoon to disengage pretty well, but if she's the one being focused on, she's not that, not that buff that she can survive through the burst that all these new champion combinations are putting out. So that's certainly a reason not to be running her, and people are just getting comfortable with different supports. Mostly Sona. We're seeing a lot of Sona, and I think we all expected that coming into it. And let's think, what are some other interesting things that have happened time and time again in this tournament? And one big point I would like to highlight is, another topic of a recent Meta Musings, the fact that the teams are really focusing on taking as many as many buff camps in the jungle as fast as possible. And I do believe, we've seen up to 3 being taken instantaneously at the same time by one team. So that's a pretty mean feat. And we have seen some, pretty aggressive level 1 invades, but there haven't really been, all-in invades. If they get spotted, they seem to back out. And it's more about stealing buffs than really going for those kills.
Yeah, and there were multiple cases in which I think the top laner took the blue buff with maybe some help or even by himself. Maybe it was like a Malphite, and they took so much damage that they had to go back, and they lost maybe a wave of creeps. And they got back to lane, and they used that blue buff to their advantage, and they actually came back and actually was able to do better than the enemy top laners. So, that goes to show they considered that blue buff so important that it was worth killing and then going back, teleporting back, and just walking back to lane and losing maybe a wave or 2 of creeps. So, these teams are really trying to exploit that early advantage of getting these early creeps and trying to use those buffs to the best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. So really important, even without the use of Summoner Teleport, snagging up those buffs. You lose out on some minions, but you get that level 2 instantaneous, very worthwhile. Another thing I'd like to focus on, AD carries. There hasn't been a ton of variety in AD carries this tournament so far. We have seen a little bit of Graves, a lot of Ezreal, which was of course suspected, a little bit of Kog'Maw, but beyond that, I think we had a game with Caitlyn where she did not do so well, but we haven't seen Ashe, for instance, and there are, quite a few AD champions not being utilized and a lot being underrepresented. I believe Tristana was also picked once, but these fringe AD champions, not fringe, as they're certainly viable, they just haven't really picked up steam, and they haven't really done well so far this tournament. And I think the one, standout certainly so far is Ezreal, and in particular the Asian teams have really liked picking him up.
Yeah, I think one other champion that has been picked as an AD carry is Misfortune. Misfortune is picked sometimes, and Misfortune is one of those champions a little bit weird, doesn't have an escape, but she's known for her early aggression. And really, a lot of these teams like that early aggression, so Misfortune kind of is on the edge of the big 3 AD carries right now and the AD carries that aren't picked as much. So, maybe we'll see a change by right so that we see a bigger variety in AD carries, but, there have been plenty of AD carries that just have not even been considered, like Ashe. Varus has not been considered, at all. There has been, Twitch hasn't been considered, so yeah, it has, but there are other AD carries that just, it's been really, the focus has been on Ezreal and Corki and Graves. I I think Ezreal and Corki are the two most picked AD carries by far in this tournament. So maybe we'll see a change. And I mean, that also goes back to why Janna was not picked as much, because Graves and Corki synergize so well with champions like Leona, like Taric, you know, those champions that like Sona that really do so well with these champions. So really, I mean, the bot lane does require some synergy. So I mean, you know, if you're not seeing a bigger variety of AD carries, you're not going to see a big variety of support champions. So yeah, I mean, that's one interesting thing about this tournament so far.
Yeah, certainly is interesting. And we actually have not mentioned Draven yet. He was banned in a couple of games. I believe Dignitas banned him out just because they said we don't know how to play against him. And there were some hints that Chaos might be practicing with him. So Draven has been banned, has not been picked, which is a little bit of a surprise to me because I feel like Draven does most things that Misfortune does, but even better. He has that early aggression. He has a little bit of CC. He has a little bit more escapability than Misfortune, and I feel like his ultimate scales better than hers as well, especially in the late game where Misfortune has to decide, do I want to use my ultimate or do I want to auto attack? And of course, auto attacks are incredibly potent. Draven doesn't really have to choose. He just throws off his ultimate, may want to focus on it a little bit to decide when to call it back, but besides that, he can just keep on auto attacking as well. So I'm surprised we haven't seen more of him. We still do have quite a few games left, so we might see him picked up. You know, is there anything else that has really jumped out at you so far this weekend?
Not really. There's been a lot of really aggressive strategies used. There have been a lot of pushing, so teams will try to get towers down as early as possible, and we've seen that go both ways. Teams have been able to capitalize on pushing down early turrets to keep up the pressure, but other times they haven't been able to do that as well. I think TSM against Azubu Frost once pushed down an early top turret, and that was really good, and but they did not keep up the pressure as much later on. So that meant that the enemy Aurelia was able to catch up in farm and actually surpass Dyrus in farm, and that really helped Aurelia get back into the game, and Azubu Frost ended up winning the game. So really, it's just a matter of if you take down early turrets, you really have to keep up the pressure and keep on pressuring so that they can't just sit there and farm. Yep, and I think that we really mentioned that in a previous episode, but now this is just another example of that coming up. If you take down early turrets, if you keep up early aggression, you really have to keep up the pressure throughout the early and mid games.
Yeah. Kind of shifting gears here and going into the top lane, which we haven't gone about in discussing in detail. There's been a lot of 2v1 swaps, so, you know, sending the AD carry and the support into the top lane. And as Brian mentioned, you know, there have been aggression towards the turrets, and that's been all well and good. One thing we've seen in the top lane is all the old top laners are still kind of the top choices. We still have Shen, Malphite, Olaf up there with frequency, and they're still doing a good job. The one wild card, of course, that's kind of new to this tournament is Jace, who has been very, very dominant, has been forcing people to, you know, use bans against him, but he looks very, very strong. Shen has matched up well against him, but for instance, Darius not so well. Dyrus ran Darius against him, didn't quite, you know, pass the test there. Of course, Dyrus explained himself. He said, oh, yes, Darius loses in those 1v1 matchups, but when you have a 2v2 matchup, the junglers come up, Darius' lane should have the advantage because of the excellent burst that they have. Unfortunately, it just didn't pan out the way that they had hoped, but certainly that is a, you know, reasonable decision to pick him up. One other support that we haven't mentioned, for whatever reason, one of my favorite champions, Lulu, was picked up, you know, pretty much exclusively by CLG Prime. Did not have very much success, unfortunately. Uncertain if we'll see here more from these other teams. As you know, we have mentioned, a lot of the Asian teams really seem to like Blitzcrank, and everyone likes Sona. So just depends. If Sona's banned out, maybe we'll see some more Lulu. But so far, there's not been a lot of diversity there. And besides Zyra, no other supports, or no other surprise supports.
Yep, and going back to the top lane, actually, we have actually seen a lot of focus on the top lanes. Maybe it's just because of how these teams are composed. For example, on Sword, Macnoon is obviously the star of the team, so you're going to focus on the top lane. But really, a lot of junglers have tried to focus on top, and as Sotere said, there have been a lot of lane swaps, so a lot of 2v1s top, and really, a lot of times the teams have both switched the top and bot. So really, the top lane matchup just switches to the bottom, and that's the focus now. So there's been more focus on the top lane in this tournament. I think that's just more a product of the players and not as much the meta right now. But yeah, I mean, a lot of pressure has been relieved in the mid, and there have been a lot of mid farm lanes. And actually, recently we saw the record for the most CS by who's it again? Yeah. It was by Froggen on Karthus. Got, I think, like 300 CS by 23 minutes, and that is incredible. And really, if you're getting ganked in your lane, you're not going to do that. But so they had been left alone, and he had farmed that much. So yeah. So I mean, there has been a lot of lane switching. There's been a lot of different areas where they put pressure, and I think a lot of what they've been trying to do is, they can put a lot more pressure on the outer turrets because they can, gank those lanes and then try to put pressure, and then if they have them down, they can kind of transition to other lanes. Yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point to make. Is mid has been not entirely ignored by junglers, but for the most part ignored pretty heavily. Yeah, you don't get 300 CS in 23 minutes or thereabouts if you're being ganked, and we've seen Froggen play Karthus since, and of course not touch those numbers either. It just depends all about your matchup and whether or not there's going to be pressure. And it's a little bit surprising because we see Maokai. Maokai is still very popular, and in general the junglers tend to be, the same sort of junglers that we have seen over the past couple of months, but they're just not focusing on middle, even if it's a Maokai who's, pretty well known for ganking middle because he doesn't bring a lot of damage, but he does bring very, very, reliable CC to the table. Even he has been going up top, and we've seen quite a bit of Cho'Gath jungle, especially going on right now with CLG EU, and I believe CLG pulled that out as well. And I can more understand it in that case where Cho'Gath isn't going to want to try to gank a short lane. Certainly a flash over the Rupture will completely nullify any sort of gank there. But even beyond that, it's just a harder lane for Cho'Gath to gank. And I'm kind of baffled as to why they haven't put more pressure on mid, and I suspect that they will going on into the later games, especially if we see some more fringe picks like Evelyn. We've heard that a couple teams like Dignitas wanted to pick up Katarina. Actually, I believe Dignitas played Katarina. CLG's Voyboy wanted to play top lane, and TSM was also preparing to play Katarina. So if we get into the later stages and we see some melee AP middles, then I would likely, figure we'll see a little bit more action in that middle lane.
Yep, so, I mean, we'll see what happens further along in the tournament, but I think that's about all that we've noticed that has been really unusual or different in this tournament so far. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching again. Remember to catch us every week. We weren't actually able to make the Friday time this week because we were at the Season 2 World Championships, but catch us Fridays 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time. We are on the ggChronicle stream, so and you can also catch us on YouTube, the ggChronicle channel, or at ggChronicle.com. There's the Meta Musings tab, so you can catch us there. So thanks for watching again, and have a good night.